Cathy Bennett is the Liberal opposition critic for finance, and she is on the line now. Ms. Bennett, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ted.
What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear Mr. Whalen's story there?
I just think it's heartbreaking. I mean, when you hear and Mr. Whalen's story is one of many that I've listened to since last Thursday. Our office has been inundated with calls, and every time I speak in the media, more calls come into our office from family members and friends and individuals who are being affected by government's, quote, clerical error. And, quite frankly, our position is that government shouldn't be asking these seniors to pay this money back. Government made the error, and as any employer who makes an error in how you handle employee remittances, you are accountable for it. And quite frankly, we think this is a really atrocious thing to be asking these seniors.
But can I stop you there? I know that if the CBC overpays me, they will come after me and deduct that money back from my pay in the weeks to come. Is it different when you're looking at pensioners, though?
I think the difference is that some of these people are, as you heard in the interview, are saying they allegedly owe this money for years and years and years. And there's my understanding is that there's a number of legal cases that would indicate that when an employer or government in particular has tried in the past to collect overpayments that have been their errors over multiple years, the courts have ruled in favor of the individuals. Now, that's not to say that, individuals who have had an unjust enrichment that far exceeds their entitlement, those files obviously need to be followed up on. But in the cases where you're talking about $18 a month for many years, and you're, an individual family, as the interview we just spoke about, has been receiving this money over many, many years. I don't think government has the legal authority to be able to ask for that money, and quite frankly, I don't believe it has the moral authority to ask for it.
You said earlier you referred to this clerical error as a quote, unquote clerical error. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think that, as an employer, government is responsible for making sure that as it pays out the public sector in a variety of ways, and it collects the benefits, and then it transfers the money that it collects into different accounts for group insurance and for pensions, et cetera. There's a high level of expectation from, number one, the people they're paying, and number two, taxpayers, to ensure that they're using the best systems that have the least amount of errors. And, when you have an error that's been in place for many, many years, you have to ask the question, well, what other errors are there in the management of government money and government funds? I mean, about 10% of the money government pays out goes out in benefits, and doesn't include payroll. And I think it's really important for the taxpayers, the people of the province, to have confidence that those systems are at the highest integrity. And on the other side, I think the employees of the government deserve to feel confidence that their benefits packages and their payroll is happening in a very transparent and accurate way.
Well, who do you and the other members of the opposition think should look into that? Should try and determine whether there are more errors, to take a look at all the accounting?
Yeah, we've asked for the Auditor General. I've sent him a letter and actually met with him and had a discussion with him. I think this is something that he needs to take a look at. We think it's important for people, both employees and taxpayers, to have a deep understanding that this is happening accurately, and we think the Auditor General is the right person to do that.
We hear lots of calls from, a few calls from the other side saying, look, we're facing $1 billion deficit. We better try and collect every penny we can. There's lots of outstanding fines. People say the government should go after those people. You talked about how there's not that they may not have the legal right here, but do you think the government should do everything it can, though, to collect money that it is either owed to it or, is out there that it has some claim to?
Yeah, well, you have the situation with the employees, and then you have the situation with those who received fines. Government has, the Auditor General recognized last January that there was about, I think, $37 million worth of outstanding fines. And we, ATIP, wanted to know, just tell us the top 10%, the top 10 people who owe fines. The top 10 people owe $381,000. That's just 10 people. 142 people owe 46% of those fines. And the Auditor General had said that about $28 million of it he believes is uncollectible because there isn't accurate data for the government to do its work, which is to collect those fines. And one of the things that's frustrating for me, certainly in my role as finance critic, is I continue to hear government talk about, they have three things they can do in dealing with the current deficit that, I would argue they created in large part. They talk about raising taxes, borrowing money, and cutting expenses. And quite frankly, I think there's a fourth option that they don't talk about because it would require them to admit that they haven't provided proper oversight to taxpayers' money, and that is strong financial management, strong systems that, number one, don't put seniors in a situation where you're asking them to repay $18 a month, but likewise, on the other side of the coin, you're collecting the money that is owed the state from people who break the law. And those people that have received fines, they're breaking the law. And those fines are their penalty for breaking the law. And I think people have an expectation that that money is collected. Last year, a couple of years ago, government laid off a number of staff in the fines department. And, right away, the collection rate, the Auditor General said, is somewhere around 30%, as I said earlier. I think people have much higher expectations of government's financial management. I think it's easy for government, particularly the current government, to say it's about raising taxes, borrowing, cutting expenses, because the fourth option that I talk about really means they have to take accountability for the lack of oversight and lack of attention to detail.
All right, Ms. Bennett, we'll leave it there. I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
That is the Liberal finance critic, Cathy Bennett.